on the trees, shrubs, and woody vines of Arkansas.
With her.
With me. He's currently working on a number of research projects, including an inventory of the plants of remnant grasslands across Arkansas, and the description of several undescribed plant species. He wouldn't tell me how many, but it's more than 5 that he's helping describe plant species. He has authored and co-authored more than 30 scientific publications and book chapters, and serves as a regional reviewer for the Flora of North America project. Theo is a native Arkansan, holds a master's degree in botany from UALR. His research interests include the ecology and conservation of rare plants and their habitats, restoration of degraded ecosystems, and anything to do with the shale barrens of the Ouachita Mountains. This is the most impressive part, okay? He has expertise in the flora of North America east of the Rocky Mountains. So anything east of the Rocky Mountains he knows. Yeah. And he's also an avid native plant gardener. You're going to find out about what he did on Kessler, but briefly, he did an ecological assessment in 2014. He produced a document from that work, and so we're going to hear from him about the plants, habitats, and natural history of Kessler Mountain.
Thank you. We're going to turn the lights down and just enjoy. There's a lot of good photographs here. Some of the people in the room, or if not in the room, certainly within Fayetteville Natural Heritage Association, contributed some photographs to the report. Can we turn this one on?
Hey, Frank, where's that switch? It's going to get really hard. That's right. Watch out.
Thanks, Frank. So this assessment that Jennifer was mentioning is available on the Fayetteville Natural Heritage Association website. I forget how many pages it is, but it's a pretty lengthy document. You can download it in full color. It includes a plant species list with every species observed, coded by all the habitats that it occurred in, and whether or not it's native or not native or rare or invasive. All that sort of stuff is in that report as well as most everything I'm going to talk about today. So I hope if you haven't seen the assessment that you'll download it. I try to write those sorts of things so that they're accessible to sort of the educated layperson and not use common names as well as Latin names of the plants and try to avoid too much technical gobbledygook. When we're talking about anything, whether it's a species, a plant or animal, or a natural community or a site, it's useful to sort of frame it in context of where it is, and not politically, not in terms of political boundaries, because those things can care less about that, but in terms of natural boundaries, ecological regions or natural divisions. And and Kessler Mountain is situated here in the interior highlands. So the interior highlands is collectively the Ozarks, the Arkansas Valley, and the Ouachita Mountains, and they make up sort of the highest ground and the most rugged terrain and the most rocky region in the central continent. And because of that, it's real important for plants and animals, I guess, if you want to think about it like that. The Arkansas portion of the interior highlands consists of the Ozark Plateaus and the Boston Mountains. Collectively, these are really all the Ozark Plateaus, or some people would say the Ozark Mountains. But the Boston Mountains are so distinctly different from the other plateaus to the north, geologically, geomorphologically, the shape of the land, botanically to some degree, that really they deserve recognition as their own ecological region or ecoregion, Boston Mountains. And then there's the Arkansas Valley and the Ouachitas. We're going to sort of ignore them today. But when we think about these areas, you can see they're split within the Boston Mountains. There's 2 major ecoregions. Within the Ozark Plateaus, there's 4 or 5. These more finely recognized, what we call level 4 ecoregions, really go a long way to explain patterns of biological diversity on the ground. When this map came out in 2004, or whatever it was, and I got to see this and read about it, all these things I've been seeing in the field fell into place and made sense to me. This is a wonderful explanation of the natural world. So quickly, the Ozark level 4 ecoregions. The upper Boston Mountains are the high Bostons, the lower Boston Mountains down here, which would include the Boston Mountains here in Fayetteville, on the south side of town. Then the Springfield Plateau, which is a gently rolling land surface. A lot of that was prairie and savanna historically, which is very important to the flora of Kessler and the greater Fayetteville area. And then the dissected Springfield Plateau, which is streams have cut that plateau surface down into some rugged terrain. It's more forested. And then the Salem Plateau and other areas. But really we want to talk about the Springfield Plateau and the Boston Mountains, because that's what's around here at Kessler. The Springfield Plateau you can see is this sort of less rugged area. So that's all plains, basically, gently rolling terrain with the more rugged Boston Mountains to the south. And this is what it looks like from the air. This is actually further east than Fayetteville, but it shows the Springfield Plateau surface, and then this more forested area are dissected ravines running through it, and then the background, the Boston Mountains sitting on top of the Springfield Plateau. You'll notice sinkhole ponds here, a really rare habitat type for us. The Springfield Plateau is underlain by karst geologic formations, limestone, and there's caves and so on down in there. This is here on the south side of Fayetteville. So you can see the Springfield Plateau surface, largely open, and it was open historically before European settlement. Oak savanna and prairie historically. Now it's pastures and thick forested lots. And then the Boston Mountains, including Kessler, sitting up on top, right like that. Most of what I talk about today, or a lot of it, is going to be about grasslands. And I want you to sort of take a literal view of grasslands here. This is the trend. A lot of the evidence is pointing towards this broad concept of grasslands. Grasslands are not just treeless prairies, but also include any community in which the grass layer with its associated forbs or wildflowers are the dominant layer in terms of either total cover, percentage of biomass, or both. And this would include savannas, scattered trees, but maybe just a few species of trees, and hundreds of species on the ground. We'll talk more about that. Also, open woodlands with a sun-loving ground flora, and then open marshes and other, herbaceous wetlands, non-woody things. And there's a number of types of grasslands, we're using this broad definition, in the Springfield Plateau and Boston Mountain ecoregions. Dry prairie, mesic prairie, wet prairie or marsh, prairie fen, which is a high pH or calcareous seepage meadow, acidic seepage prairie, which is only historically known from around here. It's all been destroyed. There is some south of us. Lowland oak flatwoods and savanna, like at Wilson Springs, if you know that area, that has some flatwoods in it. Upland oak woodland and savanna. Shale glade and barrens, which is really exciting community that is poorly known and does occur at Kessler, and then disturbed areas. This is an example of a remnant ancient grassland on the Springfield Plateau. These are almost completely destroyed. Less than 1/10 of 1%, probably less than 1/50th of 1% remaining in its original condition. These are the highest conservation priority in the Ozarks. They're almost all destroyed. This is Baker Prairie Natural Area, 350 species of native plants on just a little few acres, 70 acres or something. Most of this has been converted to development or cattle pasture, in some cases agriculture, not so much up here, but it's gone. This is the last of the least. Wonderful, incredibly biologically diverse, the only habitat left for many species of prairie obligate invertebrates, plants, grassland birds depend on these habitats, etc. But that treeless prairie flora did not stop at the edge of the treeless prairie. Historically, there was a broad gradation, a gentle ecotone, the transition between those open grasslands and our closed forest. Much of the landscape in the Springfield Plateau and the adjacent parts of the Boston Mountains was open woodland and savanna. And these are areas that, while they are forested, you can see the trees here. These are old growth post oaks, 300 years old, on a site in the Boston Mountains, Ozark National Forest. But you can see there are prairie understory there. Big blue stem grass in the foreground, woodland sunflowers all throughout, spiderworts, ironweeds, etc. People want to know, where were the prairies? Well, the prairies, the treeless prairies historically, this is the best map we have of their distribution in Arkansas. It is a lowball estimate because this is based on the original land survey of the Louisiana Purchase, where surveyors traveled on a 1 mile by 1 mile grid over all of Arkansas, in fact all of Louisiana Purchase, more or less before major alterations by European immigrants, and the landscape was probably much like it had been for thousands of years at that time. And they mapped prairie, where you see it red here. So the Grand Prairie of East Arkansas was the biggest, the Arkansas Valley prairies, but after that, Benton and Washington counties had the most prairie, and almost all of that was on the Springfield Plateau, a little bit in the Boston Mountains. And because of that, it was so that when people moved in to settle these areas, they zoned in on those prairies. They didn't have to clear land. They could put their stock out to forage and graze. They'd settle right on the edge of it in the trees. And Fayetteville, Rogers, Siloam Springs, all of these communities were established here in these prairies. Here's the zoom-in area. Again, the red were treeless prairies as of 1830, and Kessler Mountain is right in between this whole ring of prairies here. So it is actually, it and the other 5 or 6 mountains there with it are basically within that open prairie surrounded. They're like islands of upland wood. Another important grassland type are what we call glades and barrens. So these are naturally treeless openings in a forested landscape where bedrock comes to the surface of the ground, or outcrops in some cases, and it's very thin soil. They're very, in many cases, wet in the spring, it's winter, but extremely dry in the summer. They're basically little desert-like habitats. And we just finished a multi-year project to map all the glades and barrens in Arkansas and Missouri. We worked with partners up there with the Central Hardwoods joint venture. And this blue is the map of glades. And it's greatly exaggerated. So don't look at that and think, wow, a third of the Ozarks was glades. It wasn't. If I took the bold outline off of it, you would only, you'd have to put glasses on and lean in to even see that they exist. So they're a very small fraction of the landscape.
Where's Cleveland County?
Cleveland County?
Yeah.
Down south. Lost my.
Oh, it's up. It's next to.
Oh, Cleburne or Cleveland?
Cleveland.
Cleveland County is here. Cleburne County is here.
What's the county? Eureka Springs.
Carroll County.
Carroll.
Yeah, Carroll County. So that would be there.
Yeah.
Lots of glades in Carroll County, for sure.
Amazing.
Yeah, lots of glades. Big glades.
As far as counting as glades, that was a modern approach. So did it take in the historics of the glades, or what it was, or was there any sort of thought or process that you guys weeded that out? Or?
The glade map tried to include anything that was visible in a modern day aerial photograph that looked like, it would include, like, say, glades that were really badly degraded. They were now pastures or something like that, but you could still make out that they were naturally treeless outcrops.
Yeah.
And cedar was a big part of the mapping component because they invaded the glades. If you go on the Central Hardwood Joint Venture website, there's a glade assessment that we participated in, and it has all that information on the protocol and everything. When we lay the natural grasslands over those level 4 ecoregions, and again we have Kessler Mountain marked here, you can see that the prairies on the west side of Kessler are actually on the Springfield Plateau surface, and the ones on the east side are actually in the Boston Mountains, but it's where it all comes together, and the lines are very blurry. And because we get this natural ecotone between the plains with the grasslands and savannas and the forest of the Boston Mountains, you get exceptionally high species diversity. It's more diverse than either the prairie or the forest, and you also get the different ecoregions coming together. So it's a really wonderful place if you're interested in biological diversity, natural history. This is a map of Benton and Washington County showing the glades and the treeless, the historic prairies. Again, much of what surrounded both the glades and the prairies was these wooded grasslands, these open savannas and barrens. Sorry, there. I can't see enough, the lights are out, so hitting the wrong button. The glades are several types, and they're very different ecologically, floristically. There are limestone glades up around Sulphur Springs and Bella Vista. There are limestone glades sort of east of Fayetteville along the White River and some of its tributaries, and there's some limestone glades and mainly dolomite glades in what we call the White River Hills ecoregion around Beaver Lake, Devil's Eyebrow area, which you might have heard about up near the Missouri border. A lot of dolomite, you getting into that over towards that area. And then there's some really interesting glades that we didn't know much about until recently, have really been overlooked, and it's a real shame because I bet they're going to turn out to be very rich botanically and maybe in terms of animals as well, are some shale glades, shale barrens in the Ouachita Mountain, or in the Ouachita. They're in the Ouachitas also, but they're different. These are Boston Mountain type. And we'll talk more about those because they are at Kessler. The valleys around Kessler Mountain, including the lower slopes, included prairie historically. If you drive around the plains that used to be prairies around here, you will see this very prominent landscape feature, and that is pimple mounds. These lens-shaped, round mounds, 3 to 5 feet tall maybe, sometimes a little less, all over these plains. And the best evidence is that those are ancient wind-blown dunes from really dry climatic periods, that these areas were prairie 150 years ago. Sometime back before that, they were really sparsely vegetated, desert-like grasslands. And clumps of vegetation would accumulate. Wind would blow sediment up over them and accumulate, just like we see today out west. And when the climate became more cool and moist, grasslands took over those areas and stabilized these dunes that are still there today. But it makes for very diverse flora because you get these little elevated uplands and then these wet areas all around them, and you can really see these on here. Unfortunately, these are being developed. I don't need to tell you all. They're laying them down, and this is what's got houses on it now. This is what they look like out west, where they're being formed still today. And then you can see how sparsely vegetated the surrounding plain is. It accumulates as the wind blows it up in here. And these are in Arkansas here, or stabilized by grass today. The technical term for this is nebkas, or coppice dunes. We call them pimple mounds, or prairie pimples, or mima mounds. You hear that term as well.
Theo, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Like when we look at satellite imagery back in time of properties we're thinking about, I see features that look like that, now. Is there anything that kind of mocks that now that can kind of trick you or fool you? Or, if it's currently a cow pasture or even a hay pasture, will that feature still show up?
Yeah, probably so. There's nothing else really.
Well, the early maps of Fayetteville showed they were all over town.
Yeah, right, all over town, sure.
Okay.
But so that indicates that it's never been plowed for agriculture, really. That doesn't mean it's still a prairie remnant, but oftentimes, like at Woolsey Prairie, there was a lot of prairie stuff still there under the fescue. It had never really been completely run out. And when they restored Woolsey and sprayed the fescue and burned it several times, all these things were popping up out of the soil that were still there.
Cattle grazing doesn't necessarily get rid of them, it's really just plowing.
Well, cattle grazing, yeah, it'll run out the species as well, if it's intense pinned-in grazing over time, over long periods of time. But it won't get rid of everything. It gets rid of, like, the things that you're seeing in this photograph. They'll drop out quick, these conservative species that can't stand that
I
disturbance.
guess I meant the feature itself showing up on a property.
Right, no, they can withstand grazing, absolutely. Yeah. This was what you would have seen in some of the high-quality, sort of dry prairies, the upland prairies around. It's pretty well gone today from this area. There's very little of this habitat remaining. I won't go into all the details except to say some of these pictures were taken in Fayetteville. This rare milkweed, it's become rare. This is the clasping milkweed or sand milkweed. Here's a few of those over at Woolsey Prairie. That's where I took that photograph. You might recognize some of these plants. Little blue stem, one of the dominant grasses of these. Sorry, I'm just hitting all the wrong buttons here. Okay. Little blue stem is one of the dominants in these upland prairies, and there's some real drought-tolerant species like this false aloe. The green common milkweeds are driest loving milkweed in this part of the world. Then we also had mesic prairies that were sort of seasonally moist. They had their own flora that's different than the dry prairies. These are examples of those. At Siloam Springs and Gentry is where these photographs were taken. On some of the last remnants, little scraps, 5 acres here, 10 acres here, 2 acres here, all that's left of this ecosystem. And these also taken, some probably Chesney Prairie. Joe Neal took some of these. You can't see his photo credit, but these are only, these plants you're seeing here are only in the remnants. They're not, roadsides or beat up pastures. These are ancient grasslands, old growth grasslands, nowhere else. And then embedded in those were wet prairies. This picture here is taken up near Bentonville. This is Woolsey Prairie. Marsh habitat was here historically. But that's it was all around the base of Kessler Mountain, all these communities I'm talking about historically. And today they're gone. So let's get back to Kessler itself. This is the study area that I was given when I did the assessment. I spent 15 days in 2014 between April and October on the mountain. Tried to get into all the different types of habitats, and a number of people from your organization went with me in the field one or more days and had a lot of help documenting things. A lot of good photographers came out, and we did the assessment, or the field work for the assessment. It was about 375 acres in the study area. It did not include the highest part of Kessler Mountain, which is off to the south, and it didn't officially include the area along the Rock City Trail, but because I accessed it a number of times from that side, I went ahead and whatever I could sort of see along the trail, I included in the assessment, and that turned out to be really interesting in that area as well. This is a topographic map. The highest elevation in the study area was right in here. There's a bend in the road. This is it Kessler Mountain Road? Is that the name of it? Yeah. And there's like a little radio tower there, and you can walk in along the edge of that into there's quite an extensive trail system. It's pretty dry, so there's not a lot of wetlands associated with the mountain. 3 little ponds. There's only one creek that even flows into the summer, and that's right here. There's a couple of little drainages over in here, but they're really ephemeral spring creeks, and that's it. So it's there's really not much of an aquatic component. I'll talk about what little there is as I go along. And then it went down, to the lowest elevations below the bluff lines. Kessler has a lot of bluffs. They pretty much go all the way around this east side of the mountain, and it's spotty on the west, but there's a lot of bluff lines. And that contributes greatly to the diversity that you see there. The geology is pretty interesting, pretty complex for this part of the world. It's not like the Ouachita Mountains where there's a lot of faulting and folding, but it's had a number of different geologic formations that were exposed or influenced the vegetation. And the oldest rocks are down at the bottom. The youngest rocks here are the Atoka sandstone up on the ridgetop. And there's even a limestone here called the Kessler Formation. It's the type locality where this rock type was described by geologists is on Kessler Mountain. And in fact, is in the preserve. So that's kind of a neat thing. There's several soil types there. Of course, they're derived from the geology. And the slope is a big deal on classifying soils, how well drained it is, the pH, that sort of thing. I really like going back to understand the historic vegetation of any area that I'm working in. That tells you about what you're going to see in the modern time. That general land survey that I referred to earlier is a great tool that ecologists have. The grid you see on this illustration is the 1 mile by 1 mile grid that the surveyors walked almost 200 years ago, and they kept very detailed measured records from the intersections of the lines, and they said, At this point, we encountered a post oak tree that was this big around. At this point, we crossed a creek. At this distance, we entered the prairie. At this distance, we left the prairie. At this distance, we ran into a bluff that we couldn't climb, or whatever, and all that stuff's in the notes. It's pretty interesting. And they describe at the end of each mile what the vegetation was like on the mile they just walked. And they would say things like oak barrens, which was an oak savanna, or grassy open woods, or dense forest, or whatever it was. And we can go back and use that to know what they saw at that time. And then there was an archaeologist at the University of Arkansas. I think it was his master's thesis or his PhD. He reconstructed the vegetation at the time of the land survey for Benton and Washington counties. And I've overlaid his maps and he recognized 5 vegetation types: oak barrens, which we would call oak savanna; lowland forest, so closed woods along creeks usually; lowland prairie, open, seasonally wet; upland forest, what we call open woodland today probably, and some closed canopy forest in the more mesic sites; and then upland prairie, dry prairie. So he mapped that based on what was described in the land survey notes. I've overlaid it. He mapped most of Kessler Mountain itself as upland forest, and around the skirt on the lower slopes, going up over 100 feet in places, oak barrens, and then the prairies were on both sides, including coming up a little bit on the lower slope in places. This is the detail. All this is in the report. The geology, pretty interesting. There's acidic rocks, some of the sandstones and chirps and things, and then also there's calcareous or basic rocks, high pH, limestones, and so some of the shales as well. And it really creates a diversity of vegetation. There's some interesting fossils there. These are not fossils; they're just pits in one of the major formations there. But then this is an ammonoid fossil and bryozoan fossils. These are ancient marine organisms in the limestones, and these are fossilized worm burrows that occurred in ocean sediments